Tap, debit, Apple Pay, cash, and good old credit. There are more ways to pay than ever before, and many institutions make buying things seamless, almost unnoticeable. It's convenient, but does it make our purchases feel better or worse? Joining us now to examine our emotional response to spending money, Avni Shah. She is Associate Professor of Marketing with the University of Toronto's Behavioral Economics in Action at Rotman. And it's good to have you in that chair for the first time.
Thank you for having me.
First time here on this program. All right, you studied how the experience of paying for something affects our happiness with the purchase. What'd you find out?
So what I found out here was that cash, which feels more painful, psychologically painful, when we pay, could have some added benefits. Namely, that when we spend, we feel that this pain, we ask, well, is this pain something that could be quite valuable to us? And why is it that I actually bought this thing and evoked this pain? And so in fact, then we say, well, maybe it's because I really valued this object. And so while pain could be a bad thing at first and paying cash could hurt, it actually helps in the long run because we value whatever we've purchased more. We care for it. We feel more committed and more loyal to it.
So the flip side of that is, if you pay for something on credit, presumably it's too easy, barely noticeable, and therefore we care about it less?
That's precisely it.
Huh. Now, you said painful there.
Yes.
What kind of pain are you talking about when you make a purchase?
Right, so I'm not talking about a stub your toe type of pain or this emotional duress, but rather the psychological pain of parting with your money. Obviously, we like things that are free, and so anytime we part with our money, it's money that's now taken away from us for a particular good. I want to buy this water from you, for example, then even if I pay a quarter, that's a bit painful because it's psychologically distressful to
part with
our money.
Always?
Always. I mean, it makes us feel better if, for example, we buy something that we like, or maybe we buy something for a friend that we care for. So that's certainly the case. But at least in this particular context, it's more painful to spend money than it is to save it.
Is there something constructive about that pain, in as much as perhaps feeling that pain prevents us from being completely irresponsible when it comes to buying things?
Absolutely. And so I think there's these two benefits. One is the one you just mentioned, that then you have this pain, so it might prevent you from spending. You might think twice and say, well, maybe I could be spending this on something else, or maybe I don't really need that coffee or that pastry or that extra pair of shoes. But on the flip side, and this is the work that I've been working on, is that, well, then also that pain, if we condition on making that purchase, it could act as a cue of something that we care for. This must be because I care for this. And so we actually value that purchase more, and again, we feel more committed to the organization or the brand that we've purchased on behalf of.
We mentioned a bunch of different hierarchies, I guess, of spending off the top, everything from credit to cash to tap to this, that, and the other thing. When you look at this thing, is there a hierarchy of pain in as much as this is the most painful, second most, third most, least most painful, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the continuum I think about is, you think about cash is the most painful. And cash is more painful because that's the form that we grew up with. So you can think, if I grew up in the US, and so Canadian money at first felt a little less painful than my US cash. And vice versa if you're Canadian.
So when you're handing over the George Washingtons and the Abraham Lincolns and the Benjamins,
I like to.
the Ben Franklins are the most painful.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct too. Is that the bigger bills are even more painful than that. But now I'm trying to affiliate with Canadian culture now, so I'm starting to go away from making sure that I care for that Canadian money.
So for up here, if it's a Robert Borden up here, that's troublesome.
That's troublesome, totally.
Because he's on the 100.
That's right.
But the Queen, not so troublesome.
Not as troublesome, certainly.
Okay.
That's correct.
I'm getting the picture.
So cash is the most painful. It's the form we grew up with. Next on that list, you would think of the check. Check is painful because you have to write in the amount. Then you also have to write it again in that little payment window. And so that rehearsal process creates that increased saliency of knowing exactly how much you spend. Next on the list is what I like to bucket as plastic. So you have debit card, credit card, gift cards, prepaid cards. And that's less painful because it's like just a quick tap. The tap is the same thing for $5 as it is for $100. And so that tap makes it now convenient, but it's also less painful. Then finally, on the last end of things, seems to be, very interestingly, and what you mentioned at the top of the, just a few minutes ago, was the mobile payment, online payment. Because there, the phone is your communication device. If your computer is your work device. So now we're not even associating these things with money in the same way we did with the other forms.
If one makes a purchase with a debit card, that money is vacating your checking, saving account, whatever, right then and there.
Right.
If you're buying on credit, it might be 30 days away before you have to worry about it, right? Is there a difference in pain levels given that reality?
So theoretically, yes, there should be, but I've done about maybe 30 plus studies on this given topic, and I have not been able to find a difference. It seems that that actual medium itself creates this difference, and not that what we call intertemporal aspect of saying, well, I spend here, but I'm borrowing from this future because I don't have to pay for, let's say, 30 days. So I can't seem to find this difference, but I guess theoretically you're absolutely right that it's not even money that is in your account at the moment or that you even have to take away from your account. So it feels costless for that particular moment, but I haven't been able to find this particular thing.
Is it a given that if the item you're purchasing is more expensive, it's going to be more painful?
Yes, I think that is true. And so if you, for example, spend $20 for something instead of $10, then it's more painful.
But is that to say that the purchase of a house, for example, will be more painful than the purchase of a car, which will be more painful than the purchase of a book or a vacation or whatever? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, again, I think this goes back to we might feel more value or pride in it because we've spent all this money.
Yeah.
It's very consistent where there are some psychological theories, one called cognitive dissonance and another one called self-perception theory. And both of them basically say when we go through these painful experiences, we immediately want to convert them into value and where we care for it. So people have studied this in the context of like hazing, for example, or if you're paid money to do something that you don't find like unethical or things that you don't find to be palatable. But it's very consistent with this notion. So with a house, for example, you might say, well, I paid all this money. Toronto house prices are crazy right now.
Yes, they are.
So there's $1 million, for example, and I spend all this money. Well, it must be because I valued it quite a lot, and that's why. So we immediately might feel that pinch of payment, but then immediately over a little bit of time, we might then construe that as a valuable experience. That's because my roots are here and I care for this.
But I wonder if there's some competing interests here. For example, if I were to go out and spend $40 on a book, but it's a beautiful book, maybe it's a coffee table, whatever. Sure. It's something, the subject is near and dear to me. I love it. I paid the $40. I feel good about it. I've got this permanent souvenir of the fact that I have this relationship with this book. Compare that to, I spent $10 to buy an ebook online. I'm going to read it, I'm going to enjoy it, but at the end of the day, I really don't have any permanent, lasting reminder that I can put on a coffee table or on a shelf. I guess I'm wondering, I think I'd feel worse about the $10 I spent on the ebook than the $40 I spent on the coffee table book. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I mean, they're totally two different purchases in a lot of ways. One is a concrete object, where I think you were just asserting to that you get a lot of utility from just the fact that it's on your coffee table and it's a decorative piece.
It exists. It's a real thing.
Absolutely. Versus the other case, the reason why you might have bought it was just for the simple utility of just reading it. Yeah. So you don't have that memory and whatnot. So I think those are two different purchases here, to tell you the truth. I think one is more of a concrete material purchase, where the other one is more of an experienced good, an experiential purchase. And so those are quite different. But I think the same thing holds that even if we were to compare the $40 for the ebook versus $10 for the ebook, you might then, for the $40, say, oh, I got a lot of value out of this particular item. Oh, I read it because I care for it. Now, the flip side, though, is, and I have some new work that shows that if it is a purchase that, let's say you have to purchase this ebook from, I know there are a lot of students out there that are saying, man, I have to pay a lot of this money for this book I have no interest in, I don't want. Then the pain actually works to then amplify and make it feel worse.
I see that.
So think of that money that you spent maybe on the parking ticket that you had. It's not that, oh, I value the parking service. I'm not saying that. I think in that case, then you're feeling quite negative. What I'm talking about here is in the case of an item that you at least would like to purchase and not forced, if you will.
Gotcha. All right, let's do another example. Let's say there's a fantastic new book out on a former Premier of Ontario named Bill Davis. Okay. And let's say that book retails for $45 plus tax. And it's a beautiful book and there's great pictures and you know it's going to be a great story and all of that. And then maybe 3, 4, 5 months later, you see it on a remainder table for $10. Will you get the same amount of joy buying it off the remainder table for $10 as you will buying it hot off the presses. Maybe you're the first person on your block to get it. Maybe it's signed by the author, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's two different types of then people in that case, and so there are certain folks that really value the hot off the press, the first edition, and that's where so we have these early adopters. We talked about these folks all the time. The first people that bought the Tesla when it was, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's the utility for them. Where even though it costs all this money, it's quite valuable. I know today. This morning I was reading the paper and they were talking about a new brand of Air Jordan shoes that just came out, a re-release of the very first pair.
How much are they?
Hundreds of dollars. I think they're like $300 for this particular pair that is the first release.
Would you spend $300 on a pair of running shoes?
I wouldn't. And even though I have a taste for the basketball sneakers and things like that, I played myself. But these people will stand online for hours on end. Where there's another group of people, as you asserted, that they like deals. And so they, in fact, the art of the deal is actually quite exciting to them.
You're an American. You should not be using that expression
Oh, that's
anymore.
right.
As an American, you should not be quoting Donald Trump on this show.
I do not mean to, by all means. But I think the term is correct. And so if that's the only thing we have, I think the term is correct. Maybe not who said it.
Okay.
Try not to bring that up.
Do we spend more when the method of spending is less painful?
Absolutely.
We do.
So there was some neat work done that shows that basically we're more willing to pay for the same item if we pay by card, debit or credit card, than if we were to pay by cash.
Why does that make sense?
Because it is less painful, so then it's not as aversive to part with our money. So for the same item, for me, I asked people how much were they willing to spend on a mug. I told them the mug was retails at typically about $7, but it was going to be a deal for $2. But how much would they be willing to spend normally? The folks that were going to pay by debit and card, I told them that's how they would pay. They said they would pay on average maybe $7, $8, even higher than the retail price. Whereas the cash folks said $3 would be the max that they're willing to spend.
Because parting with that cash,
they don't want to part with that cash.
I get that.
So I think you have these underlying differences, which could explain why it's so easy to get into debt, part with card.
Do you know whether or not people across different cultures feel the same way about all of what we've been talking about?
Yeah, there's differences across the board in terms of not only across cultures, but even across people. So there's different people, for example, we call it tightwads versus spendthrifts. Spendthrift being willing, I have $10 in my pocket, where am I going to spend it?
Right.
Tightwads, it doesn't matter if they have $1 million in their pocket, they're quite, they hold that purse quite close to them, if you will. Across cultures, there's even a aversion to using cards that are quite different. That's been quite the interesting thing for me coming to Canada, is that there's an aversion to credit cards. Much more so than at least in the U.S., where people on average have, let's say, 10 cards, whereas in Canada it's much less. And there's,
What? People have 10 credit cards?
Sure, and you
10.
see them even more. At some cases, 13. I met somebody at. This is interesting. I was at the Apple store purchasing something a few months back in the States, and somebody opened their wallet. It was like this big. It was almost like a binder, what felt like, rows of cards, and they said, oh, charge it on this, charge it on that, then charge this much on this. I thought that was nuts, but I think that's how folks are. So.
Sign of the times. Let's finish up on this. If there are positive sides to the pain, how do we bring those positive attributes to digital payments?
Certainly. Yeah, I think this is certainly a really nice way that people can look at saying, well, digital, we know that it's less painful, but we can counteract this in several ways. So first of all, I think several sites such as, several services, apps, such as Mint.com, Mint has an app, for example, where you can set it up such that anytime you spend for, let's say, groceries, you set up a budget, and then if you exceed it, it'll send you a buzz alert as well and a high spending alert, as well as then an email reminder to say, FYI, you spent this much. And I think that can counteract that less pain. We can put a little bit more, interject a little more pain into that by having these alerts and portfolios. And so mobile has an ability for us to track in a way that we haven't been able to even with cash or debit alone.
Gotcha. Professor Shah, great to have you here at TVO.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Not at all. It was our pleasure.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.